Good afternoon. You're listening to KTAL LP in Las Cruces, New Mexico, 101.5 on the dial, also streamed live at Radio KTAL, QUETAL.org, and lccommunityradio.org. You're listening to Science. Let's take a look. I'm your host, Vince Gucic. This is an outreach activity also of the Las Cruces Academy, a nonprofit private school where I'm the board chair. And today I have a guest in the studio, a good friend, John Nelson, who is an engineer. And we're going to find out what it's like to be an engineer. So, John, introduce yourself, and then you can start telling people what it was like to be, is like.
Okay, yeah. John Nelson. I moved down here from Cheyenne, Wyoming, to come to New Mexico State University in the early 60s.
I'm not getting very good volume from your mic.
How about this?
Still not very good.
Can you hear me now all right?
Wow, this is not... let's try mic 2. Oh, wait, you know what? Okay, here we go. All right, try it again.
Okay, my name is John Nelson.
Good.
I graduated in 1960, so the early 60s, I was looking for a place to go to school. I knew that New Mexico State University had a co-op program. I needed a way to make my way through school, earn my way through school, so I came down to NMSU from Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Could I interject? Were you born in Cheyenne?
Yes.
Ah.
Yeah, I was.
So what was it like back then? Was it really small?
You know what? At that time, it was about the same size as Las Cruces.
Really?
Cruces has grown tremendously. Cheyenne has stayed very much the same. Wyoming is one of those states that every time they do a census, it loses population. So,
that's interesting because in order to become a state from a territory, they had to have 300,000 voters.
Wow,
so they actually were the first state to give women the right to vote so that they would have 300,000 voters.
That's right. They did.
And there was even a question, a question of what happens if they drop below 300,000 now? Do they go back to being a territory? Anyway, sorry.
Anyway, but I got a good, once I got down here, White Sands Missile Range had a co-op program, and that's what I was aiming at. But when I got down to New Mexico State, I found out that the Physical Science Laboratory had a co-op program, and it was supporting at that time the Navy's Transit Satellite Program, which is the precursor to the GPS system we all use today.
So do you know what differences it had? Was it not a big constellation of satellites like the GPS system now?
Oh, yeah, it was a satellite or two. It was a test program, and the Navy thought, well, it'll work for us because we're going slow. The ships are going slow. No one even thought about an airplane using GPS because, it was a test phase. And,
Neat.
And what we did is my first work phase, I went to two places, Lake Carl Blackwell in Oklahoma and Point Mugu in California, and we're in a trailer, and basically we know when the satellite's coming, and our job is to track the satellite and send the data back to somewhere back east, and they're trying to figure out how they could use that data and tell you where you were. Of course, they knew where our trailer was.
Right.
So that was the process.
What does it mean to track a satellite? You're not physically aiming an antenna, right?
No, you're locking on. You're listening to when it's going to come over the horizon.
Yeah.
You're listening to the tone.
Yeah.
And you're just turning it on and saying, okay, I'm going to record now. Very simple thing.
Interesting, because at our school, Dr. Scott Williams, whom I helped get his PhD in remote sensing, installed a tracking antenna for the NOAA satellites. And those had to be aimed very precisely, so there were all these servo motors to point it the right direction. But you didn't have to do that.
No.
Okay.
No, and there were only 3 or 4 satellites, so
Oh,
you'd have a pass coming up, maybe 15, 20-minute pass. Sometimes it's a lower amount of time if it's lower on the horizon when it's coming by. So maybe we had 3 or 4 passes a day. I don't remember. It was not very many. That was a good break for me. And the co-op program at NMSU, you had 1 semester at work and 1 semester at school. So it kind of stretched things out. My next good break in this kind of area was PSL had a contract with Bell Labs to supply co-ops for their program, their Nike anti-missile program in Kwajelin, the Marshall Islands.
okay. Where exactly is Kwajelin?
I'd say it's like halfway between Hawaii and Australia. It's kind of in the middle.
So
If you were heading towards Australia, or
there's very little in that area. Are you near any of those island nations then?
yeah,
Or is it one?
Marshall.
Oh, that is in the
Islands
Marshall
is
Islands.
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and Kwajalein is just one. It's an atoll,
Okay.
and so yeah, they had done some nuclear testing out in that area.
Was it an inhabited atoll or uninhabited?
It was inhabited.
Before the military got there?
Yeah, and I think what they did is they took one island called Kwajelin,
Yeah.
and most of the people lived on another island
Yeah.
called Ebi, and they came and worked on Kwajelin during the day. And
Oh, okay.
but the Kwajelin was totally a military complex.
Okay.
But that was a good break for me. The only problem is when you went there, you had to stay for 2 semesters.
Ah.
So it really stretched out school. But I did one good move. Back in those times, a lot of co-ops were almost like secretarial jobs.
Uh-huh.
They didn't take them real serious.
Even if you were an engineer.
Right. Yeah, because today interns and co-ops are taken very seriously, and
Right.
which is good. But I went to the station manager and said, look, I really want an engineering job. And I got one. I got with a Zeus acquisition radar. So there was several radars on this island. And
So Zeus is the name of the radar.
yeah.
Okay.
And the job was to acquire. So what they did is they would shoot missiles from Vandenberg in California with a warhead on it towards us, and our
Wait a minute. Not a live warhead, I hope.
No. Yeah, not a live one.
Okay. All right.
Our job was to discriminate between what's the junk and what's the warhead.
Oh, were they doing dummy warheads?
Yeah.
Like MIRVs?
Yeah.
Multiple
They had
independent?
started doing that, right. So now those kinds of warheads hung up when they hit the atmosphere, and the real one would be coming on through.
Right.
Zeus's job was to find that one and then pass that information to a target tracking radar, who in turn locked on and had the job of shooting it down.
And what was your success rate? Or not, that was not your part of the job. Somebody else had to.
Yeah, what I got involved in doing is doing some of the post-mission writing, and of course, missed distance was a big deal. How close did you come to seeing it? We weren't shooting at them all the time. Part of it was just, can you find it and discriminate which one is the warhead?
Okay, and what was the idea of the Nike missiles? Were they impactors, or were they had explosives to produce stuff that would collide with?
They weren't. I think they were just, at that time, it was just explosives. They were just trying to get close. They weren't doing like they're doing today, actually trying to impact.
Yeah, which is really tricky.
Right.
Especially because you can't steer at how many 1,000 miles per hour you're talking, right?
Right. So that was really interesting. I gained a lot of experience.
That's all Cold War stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you got back to school, of course, I'd been out for 3 semesters, and the kids I was going to school with were moved on. So I'm in classes with all new kids. It wasn't as much fun going to college that way.
Yeah. Oh, let me interject. My mother continued to live in Santa Maria, California after my father died. They'd both moved there. And she told me about a failed non-military mission from Vandenberg. It went astray, and they couldn't self-destruct it. So they actually used a Nike battery, as I'm told, in San Francisco to shoot it down, and it worked.
Wow.
Yeah, because it was going to come near the city. Okay, so you're back in school.
Yeah, and but I like work phases better than school. I was anxious to go out again, and so I went to Kwajelin a second time and worked at another radar and did some work with a radiometer. We're trying to track, calibrate a radiometer. So one of the things I was doing is trying to track sunrise and see.
Wait a minute. We know where the sun is. What do you mean track sunrise?
Well, I mean, we were just trying to check out our system.
Right. So where does the sunrise come in then? You say trying to...
It was just a target. It was just a handy target if you're going to... It's an infrared radiometer.
Oh, okay. So it's not radar. It's basically...
Yeah, infrared.
Yeah. Okay.
So we were just at the beginnings of... We were going to slave this to the target tracking radar eventually to see what we could see. I don't know how that test panned out, but that's what they had me do.
You know, that reminds me, one of the unsung heroes of the Cold War preventing nuclear destruction was one of the Soviet leaders of their radar and acquisition system, and they detected what they thought were 3 U.S. missiles coming in, and they were about to launch a retaliatory strike. And this guy said, "I'm betting that this is a false alarm," and it was, and because they were within 30 seconds or so of launching the strike, and they didn't.
I remember about that. I mean, I've read about that.
Yeah. So anyway, you were, let's see, you're back at school.
Yeah, and by then I'd had enough. You know, I needed to get through school, so 3 work phases was all I did, and then from there it was try to get through school. But I had a third good break.
Okay.
When I graduated in 1967, NASA was starting to hire flight controllers for the Apollo program, and I'd almost pay them money to get a job like that. And I got hired in the Lunar Module Systems group. So I was a lunar module flight controller. And
you say one. How many people were in the group? Do you remember?
In that systems group, well, the thing is, back then, there were several contractors. There was an MIT guy, a Grumman guy. There were several other people in the group.
Mm-hmm.
But government employees, maybe there were 3 or 4.
That's all?
Yeah.
Wow.
But we were just responsible for one part of the lunar module, which is the primary guidance and navigation system. You know, there was a propulsion system and another propulsion group and all that, yeah.
So, you know what? I'm going to break for a station ID here because we've got a lot to go on this story. So let's remind everybody that you're listening to KTAL LP, Las Cruces, New Mexico, 101.5 on the FM dial. Also streamed live at lccommunityradio.org and Radio KTAL, QUETAL.org. It's a community radio station, and we ask you to consider becoming a member. Well, you can go to either of those websites and find a membership and a donate button. Meanwhile, we're going to return to some music, and we'll get back after that to guest John Nelson, an engineer with interesting stories now about NASA and the Apollo missions.